Hello and welcome back to the channel. Now today we'll be jumping on the hype train, so to speak. So today I thought I would show you how to make crypto art, or rather some principles that might be useful when you try to create something. This was just an excuse to use crypto art, to be completely honest. We'll be taking a look at cell fracturing, how to set up the materials, how to set up some cool lighting, and as always, this project will be available in the description on my Gumroad for free. So you can basically take a look at it. Let's get into the video. So I'm gonna open up Blender 2.92. That's the one that I'm using currently. You can see the shortcuts in the bottom left window. Just gonna delete everything from the scene and start fresh. The thing I usually associate with NFTs is Ethereum. I think they're bought with Ethereum coin. So the simplest way to go about it is to just create like a pyramid type of thing. The easiest way to do that is actually just add a cone, and you'll want to open this bottom left thing, add the cone, drop the vertices to, let's say, 3. And then we can just adjust the depth to about 1.6. Maybe we can go even a bit lower. Let's say 1.3. You can also change it later with the vertices. The important thing is just that you have this pyramid shape. Now let's go to front view with the numpad. Let me just clear so you can see the shortcuts. Now I want to bring him up by pressing G and Z. Let me go into wireframe, C, and I'm going to select the bottom vertices. Then I'm going to press Shift S, cursor to selected. I'm going to exit edit mode, Shift Control Alt C, origin to 3D cursor. You can also do that by going to Object and then Set Origin, and then you can choose it here. Now, why we did that is because of our mirror modifier. We're going to make our work easier. We're just going to add a mirror modifier like that, mirror it on the Z, and bam, we have like that Sims type of crystal. I'm just going to Control A, apply that modifier by hovering over the modifier. I'm going to go back into wireframe, edit mode, and then I'm going to choose the face select. And this is very important because I don't want to have that face. I'm just going to delete it. I don't want to have that face inside. Press A twice, and then I'm going to just do the Control N to recalculate the normals, just in case, and Control A and reset the scale. So now we have this little, let's say, pyramid type of shape. Now, before I start fracturing it, we need to add a particle system, and you will soon see why. So I'm just going to do a very simple one. Let's go into wireframe so we see what's happening. Set the number to something really low, let's say 50, and I'm going to drop the end to 1. So every single particle is showing. Source, I'm going to go to volume, so it's going to also distribute them inside. Instead of jittered, I'm going to do random, but the result is still going to be just the same. Now I can go and search for my cell fracture. You can see I already have it here. You can press spacebar, or I think it's F4 or F5 for other Blender shortcut schemes. Pop the random to about 0.73. You can choose the random sizing. Recursion, I would just leave it at 1. And you can, let's say, try with own particles. And source limit, we can leave it at 100. There's a bunch of really useful tutorials on YouTube that explain how to use this. You can look every single, thing there. Okay, let's just try fracturing this. And it fractured it in accordance to the particles that are inside of the system. This looks okay. We also need to take into account that we need to texture the inside of this pyramid thing. What I'm thinking of is keeping the outside metallic, and inside I want to have this really cool looking kind of bluish or greenish transmission material. You could go and then try and assign everything, but there's a very useful trick that you can do. But in that case, we'll have to go back, and you need to do this before you fracture your object. So I'm going to add 2 materials. So the first one, I'm just going to name him metallic, and the next one, I'm going to name it gem or whatever. I want to keep the metallic, let's say, a bit darker, and gem, I'm just going to preemptively set it to, let's say, a blue color. So we can see in the viewport what's happening. Before we start fracturing, I want to have the gem one chosen, and under that, I want to drop down to the settings and choose the pass index of 1. So now when I go into the cell fracture, you can see the material here. It's mesh data, and you see the material index. It just says material, but it means the material or pass index. Now, if I press 1, this should, when it's fractured, create the inside blue and the outside yellow. It's such an awesome addition. Wait, we need to move the bigger brother outside. And you can see through the cracks that it's like bluish. Let's select all of these bad boys. I'm just going to scale them on individual origins. You can do that on the top corner and select individual origins. Let me just bring them down like that. And now if I go into my viewport shading, you can see that the inside is now textured. It's so cool. It saves you a bunch of time. It saved my ass a lot of the times, and yeah, just an overall useful feature. So if I'm not using the big brother over here, I'm just gonna go into my object properties and the visibility. I'm just gonna turn it off for the renders, and I'm just gonna hide the particle system. So in the particle system, I'm just checking off the viewport and the render. I like to keep those if, for example, I change my mind later and I want to do something else. I can just bump it back and correct it that way. So we're here with our fractured object. Now I want to just refine it slightly. So one thing I want to do is just add a bevel. We're going to have all of them selected. So you can do that like, apologies if I did it a bit quick, but you can go into wireframe, press C. This is going to open this brush, and then just left click, select everything. Shift, select, let's say, the part that you want to bevel first, so we can see how it's behaving. I'm going to add a bevel, and I'm going to add a subdivision modifier. The subdivision, I'm going to bump it to 2, and the segments, I'm going to bump to 2 as well. Another thing I want to do is just check in the geometry, the patch and the arc. So one thing with the bevel is sometimes you get some very weird shaping, and most of it usually can be like kind of mitigated with the arc and the patch setting. However, there's a problem that you can see here. You can see that these are disconnected. So don't worry, it's a very easy fix. That's why we have all of these selected. I'm gonna go into tab, press A again, so I have every piece selected, and I'm gonna press M and collapse by distance. You can see that it removed 730 vertices. When I exit edit mode, you can see that now it's working properly. This is something that happens, I don't understand why, but this happens a lot also with curves. If you're extruding them or beveling them, it's just gonna add extra geometry that you don't actually need. Cool. We got this bad boy done. So let me just W shade smooth. So you can see the ones in the back are kind of strange, but this one is behaving kind of okay. Maybe we can drop the amount like that. If you have a weaker machine, don't worry. You can also work with the viewport levels in 1 or 0, but keep the render ones in 2. So that when you're rendering, you can see how it's behaving. And now you're thinking to yourself, okay, we need to repeat this step for all of them. No, that's why we have everything selected and we've been working with everything selected. Right now, you need to have this part selected. This is going to be your active object, the one that has that like light orangey color. Press Ctrl L and choose the modifiers. And this is going to transfer the modifiers on the active object to all of the ones in the back. Now, word of caution, you can see some of them are not performing like they should. So you need to, go around, take a look, maybe sharpen some of the corners by changing the amount of beveling, because some of the cuts are slightly different than the others. But again, this is, if you have time, just click on those and then try to match the bevel with the bevel of the other pieces. But right now, this is like what we need. And we do this because usually if you bevel and subdivide something, it's just going to add that extra bit of, I don't know how to call it, but it's some sort of je ne sais quoi that adds to the whole render. Before we move to camera and everything, we're gonna add another thing, which is gonna be our rigid body. Again, a bunch of very useful tutorials on the web that explain everything, how to work with collisions, all of that stuff. I'm just gonna show you how to set it up for this project, and then you can also check it out on your own. I'm gonna choose the shape to be the mesh. Surface response, it's, let's say we can leave the friction there, and the sensitivity, just drop it to 0. And I'm gonna go into my, what's this, the scene properties, and in the rigid body, drop the substeps per frame to 1. So if you press play, you can see that this piece just falls down very sadly. So we need to turn off the gravity. You can just uncheck it. And with that piece selected, you need to make sure that it's presenting the rigid body. Again, we don't have to go through every piece and do that. We just go with the search option and copy rigid body. If you right copy RI, it's just going to show you copy rigid body. Copy from active. That's the one you want. Copy from active, copied. Now if we open them, yep, starts playing like that. So I want to keep these in place, right? So I'm going to use a force. Forces are really useful, and I'm going to show you a trick on how to make forces even tastier, so to speak. So I'm going to add a Shift-A force field, and this is going to be a vortex. Let's put in a vortex. So you can see when you start your animation, this is going to basically turn your objects around the center. The more strength we apply, the more rotation is applied. Another thing that's very interesting with this stuff is the inflow, inward component of the vortex force. Now, with every force, this inflow changes. The thing they have in common is, let's pump it to 10 and press play, is they try to keep the objects in place, which is a really interesting effect. It's like this shimmering, you know, they are trying to get away from each other, but they are kind of being held together, which is this really cool effect. And you can do this with most forces, I think. So inflow, mega useful, mega interesting. I think it looked okay. You can just pump it to 10, leave the strength to 1 so you don't have too strong of a rotation. And that's basically it. So we have animated our, what's it called, like an NFT token or whatever. So next is actually now the camera position. We want to find a nice and tasty angle. And I think something along these lines, it's going to work beautifully. So I'm going to add a camera. Now, when I add the camera, I don't go directly into 0 because that's going to pop me into the actual objects. I'm just going to go Control-Alt-0, and that's going to position the camera right there. I just want to change a couple of things. So I'm going to go into my output properties. I'm going to change the resolution to 1080. So it's like that. We have a nice little square. And click on the render region. If you don't know what that does, it basically means it's just rendering whatever is inside of the camera view and not outside. So the viewport, when you're checking your renders, it's going to be much faster. Below, I'm just going to leave the RGBA, bump it to 16, and compression, drop it to 0. That's what I usually do. We're working in Eevee currently. If I go into my rendered view, you can see the typical Eevee stuff. This thing should work both in Eevee and in Cycles. The Cycles one has a much, I don't know, a much tastier look to it. But let's work in Eevee for now. The first thing I want to do is set up an HDRI. So if you don't know how to do that, there's, again, bunches of tutorials that show you exactly that step. Basically, you just click on the color, environment texture. This is going to make this violet thing. You click open, and basically you just click on one of the HDRIs that you have downloaded. You can find those in HDRI Haven. We have the whole thing showing in the back. We don't really want that. And we can solve that by going under film. So this is in your render properties. So this television looking icon, film, transparent, bam. We don't have the HDRI in the back. For Eevee, I usually just open all of these options, but right now you can see it's not doing too much for us. I'm going to add an empty. you're going to see why in just a second. So I've added an empty and I'm going to add an area light. I'm going to move it back on the Y. Then I'm going to go under the object constraints and choose track to. I can search in my target. I can just scroll down. There's a bunch of cells. Search for the empty object and click on it. Basically what this does, I can move the light however I want and it's always going to follow the empty. Mega useful stuff. Let me just turn off the HDRI for now. We'll see if we'll be even needing it. I just wanted to have it there just in case. One cool effect you can try is put the area behind the actual object and then just go crazy with the watts. So it creates this, I don't know, kind of mysterious, like this is mega, this is just crazy hard, but it creates this interesting illusion in the back. You can then just light it in the front to just give it a bit of taste. You can move this back by pressing G and Z twice. So that's going to move it on the Z, but it's this like backwards Z. I don't know how to call it. Play around also with the size. When you increase the size, you can have a bit of light leaking around it. Just center the area light a bit more, so it's like that. Let's take a look into cycles, how it looks in cycles. It's kind of interesting. Let me just switch to GPU compute, so it's a bit faster. So you can see that it's very strong in the back, but it's kind of interesting in the front. I want to do just a bit of material work. This is gonna be just clicking on one of these objects, and since they have all the same material, it's gonna show on all of the objects, basically. I wanna have something metallic, so I'm gonna pump the metallic to 1 and the roughness to, let's say 0.1, something like that. So I wanna have this like really harsh metallic look. But it's still showing as black, and this is because we don't have enough, let's say, light information to bounce off of the objects. I'm just gonna duplicate the area light in the back, and I can start moving it around. I want to have this one to be, let's say, weaker, something like that. Maybe I want to position it like that. So I want to accentuate different parts of it. Again, try moving it around, something like this could be cool. So you have all of these succulent reflections. Let me duplicate that one again, and let me just G and position it on the other side, something more like this maybe. So I'm just moving them around. I'm trying to find the sweet spot where they produce some really interesting effects, something like that maybe. And yeah, if I press play, we can see now the inside material, right? So the inside material, I want to make it like something, I don't know, I see this gem inside. So simplest way is just to bump the transmission, lower the roughness to basically 0, and maybe we can push the specular up to 0.7, something like that, and the clear coat to 0.5, maybe something like that. Okay, let me push the HDRI back into it. Yeah, and we have this really interesting looking object. I don't know, it's just, I don't know, it's just cool looking. You can see like the transparency of the gem. Again, you can maybe then try turning off some of these. For example, this one is kind of okay. Maybe this one. So the second area light that we've added is just a bit too much. Maybe we can, I don't know, take away that one. Let's just scrub the timeline a bit so we can see what's happening. Open it up again. So this is the way I usually go about it. I'm just trying and testing. When I don't have a precise idea of what I want to accentuate, I just go about it like that. Cool. But the scene is still pretty empty, and I'm not entirely sure like I like it as it is. So it has this animation property to it, but I don't know. I want to add some intricacy to it. The first thing I can do, I want to select my camera and I want to drop the focal length to 20. And now I'm going to press G, Z twice, So I'm moving like this. And then I just want to make it like really, really go inside like that. I'm trying to keep everything in the center. Now, the next thing I want to add, so when I'm thinking about NFTs, it's also something connected to cables, something connected to electronics. And I want to add just a bunch of swirly cables around it. So the easiest way to do that is actually by using curves. But we're not going to, go Shift A, add a curve or Bezier, and then try to extrude everything around the scene and think about it too much. We're actually going to use a noise curve, which is a pretty cool feature when you want to do something random and something very chaotic. So we're going to add a noise. You can choose the type, and the type I'm going to leave it to 2. Resolution, we're going to come back to it, and then you can control the length. So this is like extending that. And the interesting setting here is the noise size. So you can increase this as much as you want. So what I'm looking for is something that's going over the camera, but it's not going to protrude too far into my area lamps, because that is going to create a couple of problems. In our case, I can now pump the resolution, and I'm doing that because I want to have a good resolution when I start to bevel it, because we won't be using a curve modifier and all of that. We'll just do it straight from the actual curve, which is mega cool. You can play with the octaves. I suggest that you spend a bit of time here, just figuring out, touching around, seeing what works for you, what doesn't. The seed also helps. It's not a big issue if some of these are going through your object, because you can always select them and then move them around with G. So whenever you find a seed that you're happy with, I'm just going to leave it at the first one, but feel free to take some time and go through them once you understand the process. Just going to go under my curve settings or object data properties, geometry, and under bevel, I'm going to increase the depth. So I get this. I'm trying to find a sweet spot for these. Bevel, make sure it's not too strong. Something like this. Yeah. Already, I don't know, it looks kind of cool, like all wiry and stuff. You can also add a subdivision modifier after it. Just keep the levels viewport at 1 and the render at 2, and you're gonna be fine. Cool, so we have this problem here where in some of places, these cables are protruding through them. Easiest way to solve this is just go into your edit, choose the vertex, the offending vertex, and then press O, which is going to open proportional editing. Press G. Now when you move it, you're also moving all of the vertices around it. And you just move it out of sight there. So we're going to move that one out of sight there as well. This one is pretty problematic. So we're just going to choose the point there and try to move as much as possible. Something like that, maybe. Again, it's a trial and error thing. Move the stuff around until the point you're happy with them. You can create like some sort of movement. It doesn't have to be mega realistic or mega precise in our case. Again, keep in mind that this is something that we're doing with the object that it's unanimated. So when it's animated, some of these are still going to protrude, so you can always create another version of that. Looks kind of cool to me right now. This one in the back, so we have a couple of things here that we need to take care of. Let's say these guys are all in the same intersection. For this one, I'm just gonna close the proportional editing, and I'm gonna try to move these like that. So they create like this sort of almost sphere-y type of look. It's not gonna be as notable. It's actually going to be just a nice little detail in the back. And for this one, that's a bit problematic in the back. That's not closing in. Just press E, and you can then, say, push it out of view. Select 2 points, so the last one and the one before. W, subdivide, and you subdivide it, let's say, a couple of times, maybe 10, and it's going to be fine. And again, you can return to your proportional edit and then just work it into place, something like that. Make sure that this curve over here is trying to make like some sort of path. But it's, you know, this is going to be okay for now. Last thing to do here is just texture the tube. So I have a really cool texture for this that you can find on textures.com, which is like a gas hose. No, sorry, a conduit. So I've divided my screen, added a shader editor, new material. Let's name this one cable. So the easiest way to do this, there's a shortcut that's used with the Node Wrangler. So if you don't have the Node Wrangler enabled, go under Preferences, Add-ons, search for Node Wrangler. So you're going to see it right here. Click on it so it's enabled, and then you can use the shortcut. Otherwise, it just takes a bunch of time to prep it. So we're just going to select this, Shift-Control-T, and that's going to open this. Now you want to search for your texture. In my case, it's the conduit, so it should look like this. So you have the albedo, height, normal, and roughness. I'm going to uncheck relative path, select all of these, and click on Principled Texture Setup. And it's going to set up your texture. Half of the work that you usually need to do, just done in a second. Easiest thing to do is just go under UV, keep it at 90, and then just increase the scale until you're happy. Close that like that. And yeah, look, I don't know, it looks kind of cool to me, to be completely honest. We have this bad boy over here. I'm not gonna extrude him. I'm just going to like shape him like that. So it's just exiting out of the screen. This one is not gonna be showing in the renders, but I can also move it out of view. Let's go into our rendered view. Let's see how this stuff is looking. So you can see it's creating all of these interesting intricacies with the area on the right, the area on the side, the area on the back. You have all of these reflections. It's just a cool and fun experiment to do. You can see that, let's say, the left side is a bit too heavy. So compositionally speaking, the left side is a bit too full. So you want to have sort of a, let's say, more sparse structure. But, you know, for the purposes of this tutorial, it's fine. I can see that there's a problem here with the UVs. Very easily solvable. We're just going to use a depth of field. So let me go out, back into my solid view. Under your camera settings, viewport display, choose the limits. So you can see where this cross is, this yellow cross. Depth of field enabled, so you want to click on that. Bring the distance to, let's say, the tip of the triangle here. Let's go back into our view. Viewport shading. I think that also in viewport shading, if you lower down the f-stop, you will see what's happening with the actual like bokeh, and just add some nice bokeh to it. Control Z. Bam. We're just trying to hide some of the errors. I know it's not good practice, but listen, if it works, it works. You know, that's the important thing here. Maybe I want to add something extra to the material inside. So I'm going to go back into my shader editor. I'm going to choose one of these triangles, and I'm going to choose the gem. And for the gem, I'm going to do something that I did like a long time ago. So I'm going to add a mix shader. I'm going to pop it right there. I'm going to add a Fresnel or Fresnel mode. I don't know how it's called. And I'm going to connect it to the factorial. And then I'm going to add a emission. And this emission, I'm going to pop it to the shader below. I want this emission to be like sort of in the same range as the blue one, but not exactly. And let's pop that bad boy, let's say to 5. And let me control the IOR, something like that. So an index of refraction of 1.06. Let's go into the rendered view and let's see what that does. Yeah, it adds this mysterious inside reflection. It's so freaking cool. I just absolutely love it. You can also see that when it opens up, it creates almost this jelly illusion. I don't know. I'm just freaking in love with this effect. So the finishing touch for today, so we can close this chapter, is, okay, we've got our cables, which is mega NFT inspired. We've got our Ethereum pyramid. I don't know what it's called. Last thing I want to do is just fill this space. Some of you guys with, say, a bit weaker machines are going to get mad at me. You know, feel free to do that. I have no qualms with that. I'm going to use some volumetrics. But one thing you could possibly do to achieve sort of the same effect is either using a mist pass, or you could do like a desert / realistic environment, which is mega easy to do. You can look at some of, I think it's James Traille tutorials that you can learn a bunch of methods on how to do that there and basically apply it to this scene. I'm just going to add a cube in my case, just going to be like that. You want the cube to, let's say, take as much as possible of the scene inside. So I want to have the area lights inside, and I'm going to control A, scale it. Then I'm going to create a new material for this cube. I'm going to delete the principled BSDF, and I'm going to add a principled volume. I'm going to pop that into the volume, Control T. So I have my generated and everything. In the texture coordinate, I'm going to connect the generated to the vector and delete the image texture and add 2 additional nodes. One of them is going to be the color ramp, and the other one is going to be a Musgrave texture. Now, I do the generated and I do the Musgrave texture. It just creates like a different distribution of volumetrics. You can see everything is dark right now. So I'm going to connect the Musgrave texture to the color ramp to the color. Let me just put something lighter, something like blue. And the other one, it's going to be something more aquamarine, something like that. Still very dark, right? A bit is because of the density. So we can pop the height of the Musgrave into the density, and now we can control our Musgrave. This is, again, like a bunch of tricks you can find online for this. Basically just faking clouds. Detail to 16, and then you pop the dimension down to a point where it starts to form like these sort of cloud-like structures. You can sharpen the transition of the clouds by moving some of these around. Another thing, if your scene is looking a bit dark, you can do some corrections in your render settings, which we are going to do right now. So I'm going to go under my render settings. So light paths, the volume is at 0. So if you pump it to 20, you can see some of this stuff has become a bit more, let's say, transparent. Let me just work the dimension or the scale. Maybe I want to have something a bit softer, something like that. I want to go just a bit closer inside so I can see my NFT pyramid a bit better. In that case, I'm also going to correct this curve over here. So I'm just going to pop him down like that. Just leave a small lick on the side. So it's just barely inside of the scene. This means that we also need to correct our camera, bokeh, everything. So I'm just going to pop it like that, bring it back. You can see where the cross is. I'm going to push it there, rendered view. Let me make this a bit bigger. Yeah, maybe there's a bit too much bokeh. So I'm just going to push the f-stop to 2, and I think it's fine. Basically, this is it. Now, what you can do is you can render this out as an animation. You can see that that's transparent in the back, and that's for a very particular reason. The one thing I can suggest to you is just use Photoshop or GIMP, put this onto a black background, just overlay it over, and then do your post-processing there, and it's gonna look good. You can try different forces, you can try different materials for the lines, try different structures, maybe not a pyramid, maybe you want to do a sphere. But yeah, you see how you can actually create this in like half an hour, something like that. And it's really freaking easy. So yeah, that's going to be it for today. Basically, this is it. We took a look at the cell fracture. We took a look at the materials, how to set up the materials, some lighting, some path tricks that you can use. Really simple stuff that when compounded together, or rather when it's put together, it creates these really cool type effects. Feel free to use and download the free file in the description that you can find on my Gumroad. Helps me out a lot. Leave a like, leave a comment. I always appreciate those. In any case, that's going to be it from me, and I'll see you in the next one.